said, but I'm going to add the first segment. How was the Dolphins' judgment so bad? Yep. I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay. All right. I'm lined up good. Move it down. Oh, okay. Oh. Perfect. All right. Right. All right. All right. All of a sudden, the Mike McDaniel era is taking on the look of the Joe Philbin or Adam Gase eras, which means the Miami Dolphins offense is stuck in the mud. It risks falling deeper into the slog if changes aren't made soon. Will change come before Monday night's game against Tennessee? Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Dolphins Deep Dive with Perk. I am Chris Perkins, your host, your South Florida Miami Sun Sentinel Miami Dolphins columnist. That's Dave Hyde, your South Florida Sun Sentinel columnist. That's easy for me to say. Say hello to everyone, Dave.
Hi, Perk. Hi, everybody. Here we go. I right off the top rung right away. That's good. That's what the week's about, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's always an eventful week here. The unfortunate and sad passing of Mercury Morris, but on the field. Look, we had a lot of action out there in Seattle. Before we get to that, we'd like to welcome our viewers. We invite you to leave comments in our live chat, which is the best place for intelligent Dolphins conversation. We remind you, if you miss any part of this show, you can catch the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast. And we invite you to vote in our weekly Dolphins poll. You can get that online at sunsentinel.com. This week's question: who or what is to blame for the Dolphins' 24-3 loss at Seattle? We'd also like you to subscribe to our weekly Dolphins newsletter, which you can get using the QR code that's being shown, or go to sunsentinel.com, click on the sections tab in the upper left corner, and then click on newsletters and find the Dolphins newsletter. All right, enough about that. The Dolphins are approaching crisis mode, everybody. I think you know that, right? Strategy and philosophy are working against them at this early part of the season. Is change going to come? How much longer can this continue? As we like to say around here, there's an ocean of possibilities. Let's dive in. So, Dave, look, one of the things that becomes apparent with this team is the backup quarterback situation is in dire straits, right? I didn't have that on my top 10 list of concerns going into the season because I trusted Mike McDaniel. I trusted him to know that Skylar Thompson is the man. And, you know, it might have been with us in one of our group chats, or it might have been on social media. I tweeted this out, Dave, that somebody asked me about the Dolphins' backup quarterback situation late in training camp. And what I said is Skylar Thompson has won the training camp battle, but I would still trust Mike White more in a game. What do you think about the backup quarterback situation? Did Mike McDaniel, Chris Greer, and the entire organization mess this up, Dave Hyde?
I think Sunday gave the answer. They messed it up. And I mean, you were out there for. I remember you writing your top 10 concerns or worries, and I don't want to play "I told you so" here, but I wrote a column in August, and you're out there every day. I'm out there, and I'm not seeing anything from the backups, and I wrote a column. Get the bat phone, and call Ryan
Yeah.
Tannehill right now because they need
Yep.
a back quarterback, and this game was lost back in February and March when you're deciding what we're going to do at backup quarterback. And I ascribe to the Jimmy Johnson idea. Backup quarterback is the second most important guy on the roster because of exactly this situation. The season might fall to him for a Sunday or a month of Sundays and a Monday night. But the point being, boy, did they screw this one up, because I got to admit that whatever they saw in Skylar Thompson did not show itself on the field Sunday. He looked like a guy who was not ready at all to play in that moment. Nervous, missing snaps, missing guys open. I'm not sure they were helping him out with some of the play calls. It looked like that nothing changed from Tua, what they were to do. So that wasn't a help. The running game didn't help, or they didn't stick with it, depending on what you think of it. But the bottom line, Skylar Thompson looked lost out there, and that falls on Chris Greer, and it falls on Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, and look, well, before we go on, let me say hello to B Stuck, the poet, Pretty Boy, what's up, Scott Pro, Ross Pipperno, Raphael Courtwright, Peter McDowell from Canada, as usual, Perfect Pod, Blackjack Green, Chris Kellner. Chris Kellner, does McDaniel talk to the media today? Yes, at 12:45. He was supposed to talk at 2:15. There's been a schedule change, so McDaniel will be talking at 12:45. We will keep you updated on that. Don't go away from the show. I probably shouldn't have said that, huh, Dave Hyde? That's bad by me, right? I'm trying to answer questions here.
We'll be finishing up right about then. So
there you go. So so what's up to everybody? Look, Dave Hyde, in Skylar Thompson's defense, he hadn't taken the field in over a year, right? Since that Buffalo playoff game at the end of the 2022 season, he didn't take the field all last season. So does he, rib injury permitting, does he get another chance on Monday? Maybe that was just a bad debut. Maybe he did have the jitters. Maybe. Do you have time for maybe, or do you bring out the hook and say, Skylar, you're done? And you're introducing a guy, either Tim Boyle or Snoop Huntley, Tyler Snoop Huntley, Hallandale High School. You're bringing in a guy who's been in this system for a few weeks, Dave Hyde. Where do you go from here?
Yeah, I got to admit, if Skylar is healthy, I wouldn't bring him in. I would move to Tim Boyle, who he didn't look great. At the same time, the offense moved under him, and he really should have had a touchdown pass. Durham Smythe should have come down. It was very catchable. Got both hands on the ball, and these are the big leagues, so you got to catch that ball. So I would go with Tim Boyle. From what I saw off Sunday, I didn't see anything from Skylar, even if he's healthy, that I'm wanting him to run the offense. So you know what I think they should do, and it didn't look like they did it Sunday. Simplify some things. Simplify. Some of the complexity out of this offense. Get to what you do right. Get to some throws. I mean, they had 5 throws each to Tyreek and Waddle. And when you're struggling on offense, you got to come up with something to get them the ball.
Is it all about getting Tyreek and Waddle the ball, or should your offense be able to shift to HN or the tight ends or the run game like that? That's what I think, Hyde, is that this offense is so dependent on Tyreek And good teams know it, that they know once we shut down Tyreek, this team is going to struggle to score. I like to talk about them being 1-6 last year against playoff teams. In 4 of those games, the Dolphins rushed for over 100 yards, and it has no effect because teams know, okay, we'll just let them run up these yards. We know that really what it's doing is it's frustrating Mike McDaniel because he wants to go to Waddle and Tyreek. And I think that part of Mike McDaniel being a young play caller is that he can't help himself. That Waddle and Tyreek, that's it. That's a one-play touchdown. It puts fear into the defense. It negates our offensive line deficiency. It does all of that. But I'm not sure that there's a backup plan. There's no plan B of what if teams shut down Tyreek? What if they shut down Waddle? Now what? And I think that's a major flaw in the offense, Hyde.
Yeah, I thought Mike McDaniel 3.0 would have a new wrinkle to this offense.
Right.
There's some, was it Jonnu Smith who package or, what I thought they would have done, and you saw that they didn't as the offseason went on, was develop a power package, some type of you look at the defense gave them the ball first and goal at the 6th.
Yep.
Interception. Then they also had at one point first and goal up the 3. They tried to run the ball up the middle both times and virtually got nowhere, despite Seattle being without 2 defensive tackles and a linebacker. And so are we hearing chuckles from Chris Greer's office anymore about the interior of the offensive line when you see stuff like that? Or are we done chuckling about the offensive line and then questions about it? I don't know that they have a plan B, an option B. We haven't seen it if it's there, but either way, you have a plan B. You still got to get the ball more to the engines of your offense than what Tyreek had 3 catches and Waddle had 4 catches for pedestrian yards.
Yep. Hyde, B Stuck the Poet says, with 3 years of development into Skylar Thompson, why did he look so ill prepared for the moment? What does Coach McDaniel need to admit to himself to get better to take this team to higher heights?
Well, look, the strength and the liability of Mike McDaniel, he loves players. He falls in love with the players he coaches. And I don't know the relationship between him and Skylar. You know what it is with him and Tua, okay? And I would imagine, he's talked about a great quarterback room and all that, and I don't know that this was the case because Skylar's so new on the scene as far as at this level. But at some point in there, either Mike McDaniel has to admit to himself, I don't want to turn my career over to Skylar Thompson. And that's really what you're doing when you're in a situation. And if he doesn't, as a first-time coach who's going through things that he hasn't gone through, putting together teams and working out problems, your general manager who's been around forever, making personnel decisions, he's got to sit you down and say, we cannot trust, the organization cannot depend upon Skylar Thompson winning 4 games. I mean, somebody in there had to be the big boy and make the decision that we can't have we can't bury our heads in this decision and just go blindly with Skylar.
Yep. Blackjack Green says, I don't know how it works, but will Greer be heading to the podium taking questions from you guys? No, he won't. Usually general managers only talk a few times a year. Greer talks pre-draft, during the draft, each night of the draft. He'll talk after the cuts are made in training camp. He'll talk at the scouting combine. He used to talk at the Senior Bowl, but they stopped that.
I think he'll talk at the end of the season, too. I mean, that's sort of the wrap-up.
Right, the season wrap-up. That's right. So he talks, 4 or 5 times a year, something like that. That's normal for unless you're Jerry Jones and love the camera. A couple of more, Hyde. You can take either of these, any angle you want. Peter McDowell says Chris Greer has committed gross negligence way too long in the role, and his performance shows we need a new architect. Scott Pro says get on the phone with the Steelers and get Russell Wilson. So I know your stance on Greer. I think everybody knows that. Do the Dolphins have the resources to get a new quarterback? Should they have kept Mike White? Whatever angle you want to take on those two.
Well, let's start here. Do they know internally that Tua is coming back in the end of this IR? After the Indianapolis game. And I mean, can you trust that he'll be there the rest of the year? Nobody knows the answer to these questions. But the problem is you bring in a Russell Wilson and it takes him 2 weeks to get up to speed and what are you really getting? I don't really know what you're getting anymore with Russell Wilson either. Probably an upgrade over Tim Boyle. But we're talking, can he save the season? I don't know. I'm not real confident of that. Again, when you're looking at questions like this, it tells you how bad your offseason went, how wrong you made some moves in the offseason. I remember a GM once said, if at the trade deadline, I'm making big trades. And it's not because we're in contention and I see a player and we've had an injury. If I'm having to do things off my roster, that's evidence that I didn't have a good offseason. And I think the Russell Wilson questions, and I know Adam Schefter said they got to go out and get somebody. I'm not sure they can.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, Hyde, let's migrate over to segment 2. And the question here is, are the Dolphins being outcoached? And I don't want to make this a personal thing with Mike McDaniel because I really do like and respect Mike McDaniel. I truly believe that Mike McDaniel wants to create a better human being as much as he wants to create a better football player. The problem is the better human being stuff doesn't win you any games in the NFL, and nobody really cares about that, right? It's a bottom line league. So when I talk about being out-coached, it's really kind of coaching philosophy, the player empowerment, the lack of discipline. When you look at the penalty totals from 2022, it improved last year, but the penalties are back this year. The seemingly lack of preparation and getting plays through the quarterback, the not having a plan B, all of this stuff. This might be Mike McDaniel, this might be institutional, but when I talk, are they being out-coached? It's really kind of, a lack of preparedness for situations like the backup quarterback situation, the run game, all of this stuff. It is high. I mean, I think, and as I've written, I think it's organizational. I think, Mike McDaniel makes the grocery list. Chris Greer does the shopping for the groceries, but these two are so intertwined and they're just walking together. I don't see how you separate them. So is there a coaching issue here from a lack of preparedness, maybe not up to the task, or is this kind of coaching organizational, which is where I lean, Hyde?
I think it's C, all the above. Look at coaching. Sean McDermott. Let's go there because that's easier to understand than a one-off against Seattle. Sean McDermott, the last 3 games against the Dolphins, given up 20 points, 14 points, 10 points. With defense, Buffalo was down 5 starters. So on defense, and so yes, that he got outcoached he's getting outcoached by Sean McDermott, who's come up with some rhythm on defense, some answer, but it's taken away what the Dolphins like to do best. So now the larger, or what's reared its head, and we haven't seen this since the Adam Gase days when Adam said he doesn't really care about penalties, is Sunday. And this intertwines everything, I think. When Julian Hill has 4 penalties in a game,
yes,
and he's left out there to keep playing, there's a problem. And the problem is, to me, penalties are a tell. They're an indicator that there's undiscipline. And if there's undiscipline there's undiscipline a lot of other places that we don't see. We don't know. Guys doing assignments properly, guys being ready, that type of stuff. But Julian Hill, whether he's having a bad day or not, but at some point you got to sit him down on the bench We
Right.
cannot have a guy making repeatedly mistake after mistake after mistake. And I get, but each side had 11 penalties, so the refs were, maybe they were
Yes.
flagged, but on replay it looked like all Julian Hill's penalties were legitimate. So you got to make a statement not only to him but to the rest of the team that this isn't acceptable. This is not what we're going to put up with on this team. And they put up with it, and he played. Now, he made a couple nice catches there later in the game, but I'm thinking to myself, I know 90% of the coaches that I've covered would have yanked him out of the game.
Yep. Yep. Raging Dolphins Maniac, what's up? Legend, what's up? Who else we got in here? Sam, Richard Thompson, Mal B. Crazy, what's going on? Trinity Soundwork, good to see you. Poseidon, good to see everybody in here. Hyde, let me ask you this as far as the being out coached part. Actually, let me say this. Well, how much do you think Mike McDaniel listens? And do you think there are voices in that building, whether it's the coaching staff or whoever, telling Mike, hey, you might want to consider this, or should we do this? Like, does anybody dare challenge? And I shouldn't say challenge in a confrontational way. That's a bad way to put it. Does anybody offer ideas, and do you think Mike McDaniel is receptive to ideas? Because I haven't seen any evidence of change, like you said.
Well, I mean, receptive ideas. Vic Fangio had completely 180 different read on how to play football and prepare
Yep.
and practice and all that. So I mean, you had two completely different schools of thought. But I think that's a hard one to get a hold of. I think Mike is collaborative in nature, just by personality. He listens to everybody that who he brings into his inner circle, the Frank Smiths and Wes Welkers and the coaches. So from that point, now the question is if they're playing like this on Sunday, and I'll stick to the penalties since it's been brought up. If they're playing like this, I'd assume they're practicing like this.
Yeah.
And is anybody coming forward and saying, we need to crack the whip here a little? We need to make some statement other than let's all hold hands together. We're all in this together. And somebody's got to be the leader here and straighten that problem. So, and I don't have the answer to that, but that's what needs to be done right now.
Yeah, Scott Pro says McDaniel let the players take over the team and there is no discipline. Mike says Buffalo is bigger and stronger. It's more than coaching. Mike says when a heavyweight boxes a middleweight, it's not the trainer. I like that last one because I've kind of been saying that the Dolphins have been punching down under McDaniel, that they're a heavyweight and they're beating all these middleweights and flyweights, but when they have to face other heavyweights, well, it's a whole different story. I think that's a great analogy there.
Yeah, the question is, are they a heavyweight? We went into this season saying this roster isn't as good as last season,
Right.
and I think the defense has held up okay. I mean, they got scored on 3 of the first 4 possessions Sunday, which changed the whole complexion of the game. But they've held up. They held up Sunday fine. They held up okay against Buffalo. Buffalo had 246 yards or something. But I look at the roster and I'm thinking, how could look defensively? They lost Christian Wilkins. They lost Andrew Van Ginkel, who has 3 sacks in 3 games, back with his old friend Brian Flores. Raekwon Davis was a nice, rotational defensive tackle. And they got, Jordan Poyer, very smart, great leader. He's 33. I don't see a lot of speed out there. In addition to everything, I'm just not sure that are they a great team. We haven't seen it this year. Now, whether that's because they didn't play hard in preseason to get ready for the start of the year, whether the injuries from last year are, at edge, I don't know. But I don't know. What's your thoughts, Perk?
Um, Hyde. I'll tell you this. I was actually, when you said Jordan Poyer, my mind wandered to. I don't know if you know that his wife Rachel Bush is very active on social media. This is off topic, but she was. Some of her tweets have been pointed out to me, drawn to my attention. She's almost a Miko Grimes from the sense that she's very active, she's very strong minded, she's intelligent. But one of the things that she tweeted after the game was something along the lines of, "There's too much talent to waste. This team doesn't work hard enough." And you wonder, is she hearing this from Jordan or yeah? And so I don't like to dip into stuff like this, but if she keeps tweeting, eventually we're going to have to ask Jordan about it, and then maybe ask Mike McDaniel about it. But what do you think about stuff like that, Hyde? I'm old school. I don't like to report on social media on tweets that people have, especially like Tyreek. He admits in his Twitter profile he's a troll. It's like I like to start stuff and leave the room. What, just kind of as journalist to journalist, and for the people, do we have an obligation to report that and pursue that and ask Jordan Poyer, where is she hearing that, and are you saying, should we report on that?
Well, let's stick with what she said. I agree with her. I mean, I watched this team training camp, and a couple NFL people who I talk with watch, and they're like, they don't practice very hard. They don't, and that's by design. I think that's what Mike, how he's done it. They'd say, and you look at them and they're doing things, and I'm not saying it was cutting edge stuff of where, okay, for better or worse, and you look at the performance, you can say worse. Players running, before scrimmages, running assignments with no helmets. You'd see Washington in full pads. The Dolphins are wearing gym shorts, basically. You see the Falcons running sprints after practice. You see the Dolphins just walking off after practice. And these are just things I saw. And then you get into, how hard, reps. I asked Mike about it once, and he said, we don't run sprints because we want to do more reps. And that makes sense. But then I asked Teron Armstead about, or it wasn't Armstead. It was Calais Campbell. He's been around the league, several training camps. What do you think of this one at the end of training camp? And he goes, well, the word when I called around was that it was easy. Mm-hmm. It was easy here. Mm-hmm. Then he talked about we do a lot of reps. But the point being, the word around the league is it's easy at the Dolphins. And that's what she seemed to be saying, yes. Backing that idea up. And I have to admit, by the way they're playing, it looks like they weren't ready for the season, or they're just not playing well.
Yep. All right, Hyde, let's migrate to our third segment here, and it's how do the Dolphins dig their way out of this hole? Here's where I will talk fans in off the ledge. This team does have talent. I mean, I know you're struggling at quarterback, and we've talked about the struggles with the game plan and coaching, and you can say whatever you want about the offensive line, but this team has talent, Hyde. I still think it's reasonable for them to be, let's say, within a game of 500, a game under 500 going into December, which would mean the next 9 games, I guess you have to go 5-4. But I do think that that's reasonable. I think the Buffalo is the only team currently with a winning record. That'll change, but it's not a tough schedule. I think what you have to watch out for is the road, because this isn't a good road team. But before you answer that, now I'll get to the poll question of what fans said about who or what is to blame for this 24-3 loss to Seattle. But I do think this team can stay afloat until December, even with the quarterback issues. What do you think that's realistic?
Talk to me Tuesday or Monday night about 11 o'clock. Because this is really, you talk about must wins, and I get from mathematically and all that, it isn't a must win, but emotionally, where you're at as a team, if they fall to 1-3, um, against a winless Tennessee team where they're turning the ball over like crazy, and they're looking at the Dolphins like, "Oh my God, we got to win this game because we got to go we got to get to 1-3." So both teams, as far as saving the season, the real aspects of the season. I mean, you can finish 9-8 or whatever, but as far as the big picture of what the Dolphins came into the season for, they got to win this game, and how do they win it? I assume let's say Tim Boyle's a quarterback. I don't know, could be Huntley. I don't know, but you got to find a few things he does well and get those plays, put them in there. Don't simplify the playbook for him for this offense, and you got to get rid of all the penalties. You can't have. They had 4 penalties on 4 successive times they lined up at center. The 4th one was on a punt, but you can't have stuff like that. They're not good enough to weather stuff like that right now, and so. It's the idea is take pressure off the quarterback by coaching, by running the ball if they can. And, again, defensively, the last 3 quarters, they played a pretty good defense. They played pretty well. It was that first quarter that put them in a hole, though.
Yep. So our poll question that you can vote on at sunsentinel.com, who or what is to blame for the Dolphins' 24-3 loss at Seattle? We gave you 4 options. The first option, the offensive line for failing to protect the quarterbacks and open holes in the run game. Second option, the defense for not making enough plays. Third option, Coach Mike McDaniel for poor game plan for poor game plan and decision making. And the fourth, General Manager Chris Grier for flawed roster construction. Chris Grier, the overwhelming number one. And a bunch of people chimed in. We had Bob Brinson from Nashville, Tennessee say, honestly, it might be worth exploring whether Carolina would part with Young for a 5th-round pick. He said that the majority of the blame lies in Chris Grier's lap. We did have a couple of people take aim at the culture around here. One person said all sizzle and no steak and a weak-ass culture, which, I don't know if I believe that, but, a lot of people were talking about Grier giving the contract extensions, which I guess that's more Steve Ross. Some people said that, it's Coach Mike McDaniel. McDaniel is no offensive guru. He has a bunch of fast guys who occasionally do good things. He's a horrible play caller, so predictable it's sad. But there's a wide variety of things on here, Hyde, and really, a bunch of people are, they're kind of, I don't want to say letting the players off the hook, but this seems to be more institutional anger directed at Grier and Mike McDaniel. I'll ask you this: it's a players' league, and like usually, I if something is going right or wrong, I'll usually give the players 85% of the credit or the blame. But do you think it's accurate here to direct the majority of the ire at institutional Dolphins, the coach and the administration and the GM?
I do. I think that's where I always start with. I go the other way. And to this point, if I was arguing that point, I'd say I get Brian Flores as sort of the bad guy around here.
Right.
But when he was here, much less talented roster. They won 10 games.
Yeah. I got in trouble for saying that, Hyde.
Yeah, I know. I really don't understand, because look what he's doing in Minnesota. The last 2 weeks, what was it? Houston's offense last week. San Francisco's the week before that, and so he had a tough team. You might not it might not have been fun football, but it was a tough team. It was a disciplined team. Penalties went from worst in the league to, I can't remember off the top of my head. It was certainly among the best. And I felt watching that team, he wrung every drop of talent out of the roster into wins. And I don't get the feeling this is that, I said it's not as talented as last year. It's not, but there's still some very good talent on the team. And I don't think that they're, they're not ringing the towel of getting every drop of talent out of them. That's there right now. And so that's why I fall and again, there's a quarterback situation, and institute both ways. You give Tua the contract because you were getting everybody contracts, and making everybody happy, but I wrote a comment: who's protecting the organization here?
Right.
That's really what I come back to a lot of times. So I come back to, I gave. I think it's Greer and McDaniel would be my answer.
Yep. Richard Thompson, Jorge Garcia, I Got Game, New Jersey. Welcome. Hooked Up Joe, good to see you again. Dale Finn, what's up? Bradley Maddox. A couple of very interesting questions and angles here. Jorge Garcia says it wasn't the loss itself, but the way they lost. Yeah. Richard Thompson says, if the Dolphins finish in the bottom 5, should they draft a new quarterback and start over? And then Fleming Law says, we need a new starting quarterback. Tua isn't reliable and panics under pressure. Very envious of the Commanders last night. We saw Jaden Daniels here. Where do you go with this quarterback situation, Hyde? I mean, do you go into next year trusting Tua? Let's get past this year, which I know is very hard in week 4. But is Tua your quarterback of the future? You're going to owe him a bunch of money, assuming that he gets cleared by a doctor. What do you do? What do you do short term this year, and then what do you do next year at quarterback?
Well, again, I don't know what you can do short term this year. I mean, you could try to trade for Russell Wilson. I'm not. What are you going to give up? 4th round or something? I'm not sure that really changes appreciably what's going ahead. But as far as the offseason and moving ahead, they got to invest in another quarterback. And whether that means a first-round pick, a Sam Darnold type, or Baker Mayfield type of veteran who's looking for a landing spot to possibly resurrect his career. I don't know. But it's got to be something substantial. It can't be a Mike White off the Jets because he had a start where he looked good for a half or something like that. It's got to be a guy, if you're going to turn the reins over and of a season, he's got to be able to win games. So they blew it this year, and they blew it on the contract with Tua, and now they got to dig themselves out of this.
All right, we'll take these questions, and then we'll go on to our final segment with our predictions. I Got Game New Jersey says, since Ross purchased this team in 2008, he has never cleaned house. 5 head coaches, 2 interim head coaches, and 3 GMs, not including Mike Tannenbaum. One note to that, Hyde, is you did have Zach Taylor in-house. You did have Dan Campbell in-house. So that's one note to that. Troy says, coach is finding out players being a player's friend isn't a motivational tool. Players need a boss who understands discipline and is a motivator. And then the Raging Dolphins maniac says McDaniel is too busy trying to be like Kyle Shanahan and doesn't have the self-awareness to know that he can't handle everything himself. A note on that one, Hyde, he does come from the Shanahan tree where they do have a strong tight end. They do have a strong running back. They've got a strong safety, a strong linebacker. Like, I guess he wanted to differentiate himself and do the speed thing, but any of those questions, like, again, you did have Zach Taylor and Dan Campbell here. Maybe he's differentiating the motivation, whatever you want to take there, Hyde.
Well, you had a lot of former coaches here. Let's see. I don't even start with that one because the bottom line, I said once to a guy who's running the NFL, I'm not sure Steve Ross knows how to run a team. And he goes, no owner does. No owner. They're not prepared for it. And I get that. The only way that Steve Ross, what he needs to do is find the best GM, the best Pat Riley, and they've tried it here. They tried it with Bill Parcells
Right.
most recently, and it didn't work out. But that's really the motto. And you have to get that guy right and have him hired, because otherwise you're going the merry-go-round on the front office of, okay, Tannenbaum replaces Dennis Hickey, and now you got Chris Greer replacing Tannenbaum, and it's sort of they're just playing leapfrog without going anywhere, and so my motto would be get a strong football czar. I'm not sure we're ready to go into to have this segment though of a major rebuild. Let's play out this season and see where it goes.
Right, I agree. Okay, Call of Duty 1. This is hilarious. Will the media have the gonadal fortitude to call out Greer and McDaniel about the offensive line? I love that term, gonadal fortitude. We have asked them. They laughed in our face.
Yeah, right? I mean, that brought one of the great quotes of the season so far.
Exactly. I just have to, I love that term. All right, Hyde, it is prediction time. Prediction time for this week and prediction time for the soon future. Look, we know what they did with the contracts. We know the quarterback situation. I do think that this team, for the near future, for the end of this season, I do think that they can be around the 500 mark going into December. Now, this team traditionally does not play well in December, but I think it's ridiculous with all this talent that you've accumulated to just say, well, we don't have our quarterback, so there's no way we can compete. You do still have Tyreek. You have Waddle. You got Jonnu. You got Raheem. You got Achane. You got, well, we don't know if you have Armstead. You got Jalen Ramsey. You got Jalen Phillips. You got Javon Holland. You got Jordan Poyer. Make something happen. Stay afloat. Give yourself a chance. I'm not letting them off the hook here. Like, you've got talent. You've got to change the way that you approach things and change the way that you execute. But you're not getting off this soft. You should stay afloat until December, and I think that you are good enough. You have enough talent. There's no reason for you to, unless you have some major injuries, some more major injuries, but you've got the talent here. You really do. Like, this thing is not all about Tua. Like, it can't be. It's got to have more depth than that. So having said that, Hyde, I'm going Dolphins 31, Titans 24. I'm going a high-scoring game. I'm going that they're going to wake up because they're at home. And I don't know how long that will last, but I'm going with the Dolphins this week, and I'm fairly optimistic about the season until December.
31 points. That's a gush. They're averaging 11 this year.
I know.
I'm going to root for me in this game, and how many bad years have I seen start within the first month, and then you just have to roll it out. So I'm going to vote. I'm going to say Dolphins 17-16, just because I don't want to be writing postmortems for the next 3 months. Now, the one fear, the one concern with the Dolphins, where you want to simplify the offense, Tennessee has two very good defensive tackles.
Right.
And so here we go with the middle of the offensive line again. But that presents a legitimate problem where Seattle had both their defensive tackles were hurt. And so, but I think that they got to come up, they simplify, maybe it's the outside zone run, then maybe it's I don't know, but this is where Mike McDaniel is going to earn his money, and picking the quarterback and getting this guy ready to play. Skylar Thompson had guys open last week, and it looks like he's looking at them, and he just didn't pull the trigger sometimes. So this is the situation the Dolphins are in. They should be able to tough out a win if they're, again, Jordan Poyer mentioned at the start of the year, are they tough enough? Basically, he was saying, is this team tough? Well, this is a moment to see if this team is tough enough.
This is. So we will see. I'm hoping for good things. Like you say, Hyde, I don't want to have to be, writing postmortems for the next, 12 weeks or whatever. I'm not just saying this. I really do think that they're going to have some kind of offensive explosion, hit some big plays. Maybe they get a defensive touchdown, but I could see Tyreek and Waddle having big plays, Achane waking up. They're at home. This is what they do at home. So I'm optimistic. I am optimistic. I don't know what happens in
I want
December.
whatever you're having. What do you have for lunch, Perk? I want.
If they win, if they score 31, I'll give away the recipe. All right. That is this edition of Dolphins Deep Dive. That's Dave Hyde. I'm Chris Perkins. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We're back next Tuesday at noon, sunsentinel.com.